That was short and sweet, that introduction. I won't bother you with long biographies either, but in case you can't read the badges, that's Jon Turteltaub on my far right. Next to Belle Avery. Was that applause? Did I? Thank you. Thank you.
I didn't get applause.
It was joint applause. Catherine Ying. Applause, please. Wayne Jiang. Aye. Chantal Nong. And are you Benji or Ben? Or both?
Both.
Both. Applause for having two names. We're going to be talking about the Meg this afternoon, which I managed to break a small piece of news to one of my speakers here today, is now officially the largest U.S. China co-production in terms of box office. It has finally overtaken Kung Fu Panda 3.
Yes.
So there's something of a record. Its backstory is actually far more interesting than the box office record. And I'm going to turn, well, we're going to do hopefully three things. I want to look at the origins of this, which go back over 20 years. Secondly, I want to look at how it became a co-production, in particular, how it became a Chinese co-production. And there's lots of contortions there. That's why we have so many panelists. And then we're going to talk about the marketing and distribution, because that also is quite interesting and shows up some of the cultural differences between what people do in the States and what happens in China. Jon Turteltaub I met a few moments ago. I had difficulty shutting him up, so I'm going to leave him till last. But I am going to talk to Belle first, who I believe can also talk quite extensively about the backstory, and that's where we're going to start. This project, as I said, started as a project roughly 20 years ago. You've been involved for how long?
Since 2008.
Is the microphone working for Belle? 2008.
Can you hear me? Yep.
Yes, great. 2008. And
yes, I optioned the property at the end of 2008.
And what had been happening to it before that?
It had been with Disney. When the book was only 200 pages before it was actually published, Disney had bought it. And Disney attempted to make it for quite a few years. And they didn't make it. And then New Line had optioned it, and then New Line tried for several years as well.
And what were they looking at? They were looking at it as in the same light as you, or something different altogether?
No, I think it's about timing too. But I think that Disney was looking at more as possibly a family film, and that was kind of a hard thing to do with a megalodon, especially Meg. And then New Line, in my humble opinion, was taking it too dark. Mm-hmm. For me, it's always been Jurassic Park Under the Sea, if you will.
So Jurassic Park Under the Sea. Excellent. Lots of people getting chomped. And then it went quiet for a number of years, and you bought not just one set of rights, but several.
What happened was I bought all of the rights. When I talked to Steve about it, when he told me it was available, I said...
I warned you about this. Steve...
Oh, I'm so sorry, Steve
I want names and titles properly, please.
Steve Alton, who's the author of the book. So yes, I told him that because such prestigious companies had tried to make it, that it would take a while to actually get it made, and that timing would have to be correct. So when I did it, I knew it would take a great deal of my life. So I optioned not only the book, but the entire franchise.
And what was your experience beforehand?
With Warner Brothers?
What were you doing before?
With the Warner Brothers?
What were you doing before?
Oh,
Before you became this cavalier who tried to do what the other studios couldn't do?
I've done a few different things. I did film trailers in New York for a boutique agency for many years. And then I did script doctoring for many years, and then ghostwriting, and produced a couple of movies and directed 2 movies, and then bought Meg.
And you bought Meg as a series of books. It became a script which was not in your hands initially, and then you did something rather unusual anyway.
Yes. When I bought the property, we were not interested in any of the scripts that anyone had. So because I had done some scripts before in the past, I did a script with the author, Steve Alton. And that's the script that we took over to China, or that I took over to China in the first place. And then I decided to rewrite it a bit, and I stayed in Qingdao. I was consulting in China with different financial groups, Goldman Sachs, many companies. And, but I knew it would be really important. It was easy to see where China was going in the future with film. And I knew that it was really important to be incredibly respectful of the culture and the country of where they were going. And there were just so many things happening that I knew synergistically it was the right place to do the co-production.
We've almost jumped ahead half a step because, in fact, the books were set in Japan.
That is correct.
So what did you not like about doing it as a Japanese set movie?
I think you had to look at the marketplace. Mm-hmm. Japan was once a tremendous leader in entertainment, and they were not at that time, and it was very clear that China was emerging. So it seemed like that it was the proper thing to do with the franchise.
So you were being opportunistic in looking at the money and all the upside.
Well, that, and also the fact that in 2014, culturally it seemed the correct thing to do because China had the first female scientist who went down into the Mariana Trench. So it seemed to fit with what was going on culturally in the country.
So you'd by then written a script yourself. Unusual to have a producer-writer. We salute you for that. And then how did you get it made into a movie?
Poof. Wore out a lot of shoes in China. I went to many different companies in China, and I lived there for 5 years, off and on, about 6 months a year, just trying to understand how the business was and get to know some of the players in China. And I went to many different companies, and nobody had any interest, but they were fascinated with the big tooth that I was carrying around because I had an 8-inch megalodon tooth. And but it was not easy, and but I prayed a lot, on my knees many times, and then finally I met Ben. Yeah. And that was incredible because it was the way. If you don't mind me just saying this, it's funny how films happen because you never know how they come together. And it was an interesting thing because I was in the hotel and I was thinking, God, what am I supposed to do? I'm here. I know it's supposed to be with China. I need some help. Went in the mall shopping, and there was a woman speaking Chinese to a man with a Scottish accent, and just met them briefly, had lunch with them, and they asked me what I was doing, and I told them about the movie, and they said, "You have to meet Ben." That's how that happened. After all of those years of being there and doing the legwork, it was because of happenstance.
That's Joyce, right? You're talking about Joyce, right?
Yes, Joyce Chow.
Yeah,
Joyce
thanks to
Chow.
USC Connection. So.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Cue Ben. Thank you. The next speaker. And what did you see in the project? Why did you like it? Why were you were just fascinated by this tooth, weren't you?
Well, I just put in my 2 cents, and others, this guy, they're the biggest boss on the success of the whole project. For me, I think the biggest lesson I learned from this, the Meg movie, is for China, U.S. co-production, you need at first step to get right material. Because in the past years, we and me, we're like the first generation local Chinese executives for studios back in the 90s. All these years, in the past more than 20 years, I've seen so many scripts. I mean, China-U.S. co-productions could be sent from U.S., could be from China. I see a kind of a tendency here. They're always people are always trying to provide us with what they think naturally suitable material for China-U.S. co-production. There are 3 kind of stories that, stories that I think so many scripts on these 3 things. Flying Tigers. Mm-hmm.
I counted 8 projects like that at one stage.
I saw about 5. Jewish refugees in Shanghai during the Second World War.
Interesting, I know some of those. Okay.
Third one is foreign missionaries going to China to help local people, something like that. All this sad historical piece. People think, a lot of China and U.S. producers think that this is naturally suitable for co-productions because, it's appealing to Chinese audience and U.S. audience, everything. I'm not saying they're not good. They're very good, very solid, very a lot of cultural background and everything. But the thing is, considering the current situation of China-U.S. relations, there are not a lot of things that the two sides have not reached to a kind of agreement.
Yeah.
So when you look back to the history, there are a lot of things that on the China side, they have an opinion. On the U.S. side, they're different kind of mentality. So for me, I think the lesson from Meg is for the co-production material, we should look forward, at least at this point of time. The forward-looking kind of projects targeting young audience, that's kind of the key thing to start with.
So genre projects is in particular?
What could be comedy, about current life, young people's life in China and US. Could be science fiction, but just do some happy and family entertainment, funny, entertaining projects.
So not
rather
sad
than
historical
looking at the
projects. Got it.
historical could be good, but this is not the right time for us to do this.
Got it.
Yeah.
And in this particular project, what was it you saw and what did you do then? Because you were working for a company called Reach Glory.
Yeah.
And what did you do then?
Well, for Rich Glory, for the most part, we did local Chinese productions, and also we help Hollywood studios to promote and market their movies in China.
Yeah.
So
I remember you saved me in a car park at one time outside the Beijing Film Festival.
Exactly.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
And what did you do with this film? How did you come on board?
Yeah, as Belle said, I was involved in the early stage of financing and also the development of the script at the very early stage of the project. And as I said earlier, Wayne, I've known Wayne for many, 20 years.
So you were responsible for bringing in Wayne?
Yes. I think they're the right company, and he's the right person. He knows, China-U.S. co-production, the whole background, everything. And also Chinese media capital, CMC, just started, this Gravity Pictures.
Let's explain what Gravity Pictures is, and then we'll bring in you as well.
Sure.
I was.
Yeah.
She is.
I know. Past and present. Okay. Wayne, at the time, what did you do, and what was Gravity doing then?
Ben and I, we have same background because we were first generation of studio in China.
Yeah.
We were responsible for the theatrical release. I was my first job in the film industry was in Sony Pictures in late 1990s. Actually, Sony is one of the first Hollywood company to do a co-production. So I have many chance to meet co-production like Mummy 3 before and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Yeah.
So at one day in early 2014, I had a dinner with Ben. Ben introduced to me Meg, and he gave me a book. When I read the book, and the first script, which is was written by Belle. So I called Ben. So it could be potential co-production, I think. So Belle came to Beijing, and if I remember correct, we don't have much talk. We just exchange some thoughts on the project, and we quickly reach agreement, right?
The moment you saw the tooth.
Yeah, she brought me
He saw the tooth.
The
He
tooth.
said,
So you bought the tooth, you bought the script.
he said, "Is it real?" And I said, "Yes." And he went,
got it.
"Really?"
And Gravity Pictures, maybe we should explain what Gravity is. It belongs to China Media Capital, which is a large funding organization with a view about media investment, run by Li Gang. It was doing production and distribution, or only one of the... Was it doing both?
Gravity is owned by CMC.
Yeah.
We are focused on the production, but we have a distribution arm as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So you saw it as a co-production for your company at the time?
Yes.
Great. Catherine, do you want to bring the story on a little bit further now, as the present-day version of Wayne?
Well, let me explain the relationship between Gravity and CMC a little bit first.
Thank
CMC
you.
is one of the largest and leading media conglomerates in China. So we have a lot of business lines, and one of which is film. And CMC actually created Gravity from ground up with the help and all the efforts from Wayne at that time. And it's Gravity is actually a full-fledged with all the functions from development to production to marketing and distribution, with all the services and the capabilities. And for CMC actually, because at that time Wayne was the CEO of Gravity, and I worked at the corporate level at CMC headquarters, but I helped Wayne a little bit on the Meg, on a lot of the structuring of the deal and on the business side. So I understood why CMC, from a corporate perspective, endorsed and supported Wayne and Gravity to do the film, because our chairman Rui Gang and also the entire group was of the vision that the future, at least for China movie, is to embrace the world and also to work extremely closely with Hollywood, to learn from them and become, and hopefully will absorb all the strengths and tricks of movie making and entertainment to become Chinese capabilities. Yeah. So actually, we had a successful, used to be the #1 co-production in history, which was called Kung Fu Panda 3. That actually came from Oriental DreamWorks. That was a joint venture between CMC and DreamWorks. And now, happily, we have Meg. So you can see a pattern of what CMC has been doing, is trying to do, co-production, working with, and I'm very glad and happy that we have had two success, in not very long period of time. And at that time, when Wayne brought up the subject of doing a Meg, our chairman and the entire group was very supportive, because at that time it was sort of unimaginable for a Chinese company to actually control an IP and to take the initiative to do to create a franchise, so to speak, or potentially a franchise from ground up.
And did you know what the budget was at that stage?
Well, well, I could definitely say that it went up, but I think at the very beginning, I think the development cost was about $2 million. And at that time, it was a little bit high for a Chinese company.
Right.
But the group and our chairman were very supportive, because as we saw, that was the future, and also because of the nature of the movie, that it had the potential to become a franchise movie. Mm-hmm. And then also at that time, CMC, well, as of now, CMC has a lot of business lines, including location-based entertainment, so theme parks, etc. So we saw the potential of Meg could potentially be commercially
Jurassic
successful.
Park Under the Sea. Yeah.
So from a lot of perspectives and considerations, that we thought it was a very good project, and was very grateful that Wayne and Belle actually worked so hard on the project.
So this was a large English language project which was being controlled by a Chinese studio.
Yeah, I think that was unprecedented.
Unprecedented.
Yeah.
I first became aware of this when there was a press announcement, I think it was at Hong Kong Film Art 3 years ago, when it was presented as one of the first films on the flagship entertainment slate. What is flagship, or what was flagship, I should say, and how did it get onto that list?
Flagship is a joint venture, is a joint efforts between CMC and Warner Brothers. Chantal knows a lot, and at that time, it was a very good timing actually, because at that time CMC was negotiating with Warner Brothers to set up the joint venture Flagship,
right.
And Meg actually became the first project that could. As a great example that we could work with.
But you'd been shopping it around to some of the other studios as well in Hollywood.
I think Wayne had more details of that.
Okay, Wayne, who did you try and get to finance it in Hollywood?
We sorry. we knew it was going to be Warner Brothers
Yeah.
because we wanted Warner Brothers. We had other interests, there was no question, from all the studios, actually, well, except two. Well, but
Fox and
we wanted it to... You're...
Yeah.
Okay, there were a few others. But we wanted it at Warner Brothers because we liked the team at Warner Brothers.
I think from a creative perspective, Warner Brothers was probably the best choice that you could get. And from CMC's perspective also, because Warner Brothers is our closest strategic partners.
Yeah.
And of course, we would bring that project to Warner Brothers first.
Yeah.
And just very lucky that they liked the project and greenlit it.
Chantal. What did you like about it?
Well,
What made you get the checkbook out?
I wish I could say I was the one who had the checkbook. I work for those who have the checkbook. But yeah, it started with the relationship that I believe Wayne had with Richard Fox, our head of international, and he had, and he often does this. There's so many territories where there's a lot of great material that comes out, and the question is, would the Warner Brothers group that does the movies for the global market be interested in picking them up? And we actually do have a lot of remakes from a lot of different territories. And then when Richard sent it to us, my then boss, Greg Silverman, really took to it because for us, the important thing is that we put it up to the normal standard of a Warner Brothers movie. We weren't compromising our decision-making because of the potential that it would be a Chinese partnership, which I think is important creatively. And so before this even showed up, I had actually been quietly trying to develop my own giant shark movie. I knew in the past that Greg had talked about, wouldn't it be cool to have a megalodon movie? So it actually made sense when it showed up. And so when we took it on, we continued development in the way that we would any other Warner Brothers movie, and produced it, and were very hands-on in the way that any normal Warner Brothers movie would be, because it's a great concept. The fact that it had Chinese elements were very organic, and I think one of the greatest successes is that you could show it to any audience and nobody was talking about how it felt forced or that it was a co-production. A lot of the other movies that have been out there that are co-productions, the leading press piece is why it worked or didn't work as a co-production. Did X actor make sense? Was that forced? And we actually were just reviewed and taken in by the audience as a movie. So it was, I think from the start, the global elements of it were already there, including the China pieces.
I owe you an apology, because I don't remember that Hong Kong Film Art press conference whether your name was attached to it or not. When did you come in?
I didn't come in until spring of 2016, I believe. And boy, was I desperate. And everyone's talking about what a great idea it was, and we didn't all know. We were being laughed at by a lot of people for making this movie. And before the movie came out, it was testing, and the tracking was horrible. And they were saying, this is a huge mistake. Warner Brothers has blown it. China is done. Nobody knows anything, really. You just do it, why is it successful? What do they have in common? They're all smart people, right? Dedicated, focused, smart, with taste, right? There's something international, I think, about that. But I don't know that there's secret magical properties we found. People just worked hard and tried to figure it out as we went.
You hadn't been to China before, had you?
I'll tell you, oddly enough, I would love to say, yeah, I'd never been to this China. I went on a trip when I was 15 in 1979, before any of these people were born. And, I saw...
Is it off the record?
I saw a very different China at that point. There was 10 million people in Shanghai, all of whom were wearing black shorts and a white short-sleeve shirt. And there were no cars, but there were gigantic roads. It was a whole other thing. So to come back after all that time was, it was like a time travel thing. It was crazy. And I think Americans are still figuring this all out. We don't know. I mean, China was not in our psyche, you know, Russia, 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 right? Thank God we don't have to worry about China, China, China. They got their own problems. Now China has emerged in I think, a great way. Because Russia is sort of an enemy. China's is competition, right? So working together eases that competition and builds on that competition, right? But there's really no significant antagonism there. That's huge opportunity, right? So it's sort of meant to be, I think.
And you figured that out before you signed on, or?
No, I signed on when Warner Brothers offered me a lot of money. Which still wasn't enough, so I negotiated for more.
Okay. We'll come back to that.
But you know what? We can talk about all this stuff. Every single person up here, this is why it's enjoyable to talk to this group as opposed to Variety or film students. For the money, 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 right? Now, no, as a director, I really want to create something, but I want the movie to do well, right? Just not be good. I want it to do well. Everyone here, right? That's what it is. It's the movie business, and we all want it to do well. And it's a lie every time someone says, well, it was so meaningful to me, I don't care how it did.
A moment ago, you did talk about kind of building good relations. That's kind of my cue to talk about how this became a co-production. Because many films which are made between America and China are called co-productions. Most of them are not. They are some kind of hybrid, co-venture, co-whatever. How did this one actually become an official co-production? Belle.
Well, I had been going to China for like 5 years before, and so I wanted it to be a Chinese co-production. It was very important to me that it was Chinese co-production. It was easy to see, again, where the industry was going. So what I did was I stayed in Qingdao for about 4 or 5 months. I did a ton of location scouting all through China to see where would best fit Meg, and then created the Chinese characters, created the Zhang Institute and all the characters beforehand. Because to me it was really important to try to get the Chinese characters right and to get the cultural elements right before even going to a company. I think that was crucial because I was watching what was going on and it was kind of ridiculous with, you know, film companies coming over there and just throwing a couple of Chinese actors in something thinking it was a co-production, when it's not that way at all. It has to culturally be sound. There are many things. But I think the key is being synergistic and being respectful. And I think that we did that. So it was planned from the very, very beginning to be a co-production.
We also did all the official things that you need to check off the to check off the boxes of being.
Give us the checklist.
I mean, and I say that because it's not easy. So you know, a third of the cast has to be mainland Chinese. And by the cast, we mean the leads.
Lead cast, yes.
You had to shoot in China. What were the other? I think those were the
investment.
Yeah, of course the investment. So we had the
investment and ownership. It has to be
investment, ownership,
Location.
At least the
In the
30%.
Chinese
It's
language
a rule
also.
of thumb of 1/3 rule.
Yeah.
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 You see a third across the
I
board.
do see. Third of the cast, third of the lead cast, third of the location, and at least a third of the money. Those are the normal rules. I was teasing Belle at lunch that you actually didn't shoot a third of the movie in China.
Right.
Was that a problem? You're shaking
No,
your head.
it wasn't a
Elaborate.
problem. I mean, we shot for, I guess, 2.5 weeks in Sanya Bay.
Yeah.
And we used a tremendous amount worked with a tremendous amount of people, over 2,000 Chinese. So I think that it kind of balanced out, if you will. But we shot 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, but we were there for
We had
3 months beforehand.
200 Chinese crew.
Yes,
while we
over
were in
200
Sanya.
Chinese
Yeah.
crew.
And those are things that you do particularly to achieve the co-production, because the truth is you can do those scenes in New Zealand where we shot the rest of the movie, but we made the choice to do those 2 weeks in China to achieve the co-production on top of everything.
Yeah. Because that would have been another possibility. I mean, you did shoot in New Zealand. You had a studio kind of built specially for you. you got a special uplift from the New Zealand government, an extra 5% bonus tax credit or production credit. So they think of it as kind of their movie too. You could have structured it as a New Zealand-China official co-production using their bilateral treaty, but you chose not to. You chose to go the American-Chinese route using the Chinese system of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. What swung it in that way?
Sorry, the question is why was it not a China New Zealand?
Yes, which it could have been.
Yeah, but it's between CMC and Warner Brothers.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's
by its nature, it's U.S. China.
So
Warner is an American company.
They skewed it.
American company,
Yeah.
Chinese company,
Right.
China-U.S. co-production.
Right.
Right.
Got it.
But it's also important to do as a China co-production because what kind of money that you get as a production company will be different, will be higher than all these quota movies.
Absolutely.
And that's the first one. And the second, you get national treatment as a local film. So you get to choose your own release date and with all the benefits. So it's very crucial that we qualify as a China-U.S. co-production.
And when did you have to put it through the censorship system? Because if you're doing it as a co-production, you have to use local rules, which means script censorship and eventually completed film censorship. So
we got a co-production status before the shooting. Yes.
Yeah.
We did everything according to the policies.
According to Chinese policy rules.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Which brings us to this summer's release. It did extremely well. It opened in the U.S. first. Is that correct?
It was the
We do the same
release
day and
date.
date
It was a day and
release
date.
in both two countries.
Was that important that it was day and date? Whose choice was that?
That
We
was,
we made decision. I think
the decision.
the
That
Gravity
was,
and the Warner made
Brothers.
decision together.
Yeah.
That was a collective decision after a long time of discussion and observance of what's going on in the U.S. market and also in the China market. And also, but I think it's also important because it's by nature a summer movie, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Popcorn summer movie.
So this is the big family/youth movie. The marketing would benefit from having a big bang everywhere all at once. So, was that the strategy?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that as a co-production, it was always targeted to, it's a statement to do a day and date, particularly with China and the States. So if a date wasn't working for China, but it worked for us, we wouldn't do that date. So we had to, and there was conversations and things did move because you had to find the happy medium, and Chinese releases would affect the China date, American or North American or the global releases would affect our date. So it was really important to find the right date for both markets, and then the rest of the world kind of came along with it. So it was a puzzle piece, but I think that everybody was
actually,
really
the
focused on
result
making it
of
work.
the box office actually reflects this strategy. It's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. I mean, North America, 1/3 of the total box office, China, and the rest of the world. So it's the right decision to make.
Some
I
nice
think.
symmetry there. Yeah. And you were able to release it was actually August, wasn't it? Or
Yes.
was it?
August 10th.
Which was in what would
August
normally
10th.
be the blackout period in China.
It's
Very
at
co-production.
at the end of the blackout
Right.
period.
So you were able to open a large English language movie with Jason Statham in August.
Actually, there was one other movie that was in English language, it's Skyscraper. That was by now where Wayne is working on.
Which Wayne is also
Oh,
involved
it's
in.
another story.
But yeah, there's never an official rule of blackout period in China, but it's case by case each year. But this year, August 10th is about at the end of the blackout period, because after that we had Ant-Man and we had Mission Impossible 6 coming up right after us.
But quite convenient that you were able to have two quite large tentpole movies going into what was normally a blackout period.
Yeah, definitely. We definitely benefited from that.
Yeah.
How was the film presented? How was it marketed in the two different countries?
Well,
In the U.S.
Belle can tell the story in the U.S. first.
Well, no, in the U.S., I mean, the Warner Brothers team was brilliant. I mean, they absolutely were, because they took Brian Worsley, for example, and Sam Bird. They were pretty much, I think,
Yes.
running the show, and they were doing incredible trailers, because they came up with the idea to really do something that was fun. And thanks to things that Jon did in the movie, they really made it so that we didn't take ourselves seriously. And the film didn't take itself seriously either, but they really figured out how to sell it in that way so that it wouldn't be taken seriously. So when you got there, you knew what to expect. And it's one of the best campaigns. I did trailers for years, and it's one of the best campaigns I've ever seen.
Yeah. But the strategy is a little different in China, because in the U.S., we were not taking ourselves seriously, but in China, we did take ourselves very seriously. Because, Chinese people, Chinese audience love monsters. So the concept of Jason Statham fighting a prehistoric shark, the concept is very appealing. And so we had to emphasize the action and adventure part of that. Plus, Jason Statham is really one of the 3 most beloved actors in China.
Yeah.
So we had to stress that. But on the other hand, co-production, especially U.S. China co-production, had such a bad track record and reputation in the past. It was not like that when we first started doing the movie in 2014, but over the time, between the movie was made and released, we had a lot of bad examples. So especially in China, people didn't want to go to see any of the co-productions. So as a marketing strategy, we had the plan, it's staged. So at the first stage, we really did not emphasize that it's a co-production, although we wanted to. But facing the reality, we had to downplay it.
You played it down.
Yeah, so we actually emphasized that it is a really high-profile, big-budget blockbuster from Hollywood, pure blue blood, Warner Brother production. With all the big, the bigger, not biggest, but only the bigger and larger.
Yeah.
And because usually people would associate Jason with a kind of a cult movie, so it's not a blockbuster movie. So we had to change people's perception about that. And also, unlike in the U.S., Chinese audience do not have the habit of watching shark movies. They always associate shark movies with B-level or less, or lower, low-budget movies. So we had to change that perception as well. So a lot of obstacles, co-production, Jason cult movies, and also the shark movie. So we did a lot of things, the publicity events, for example, Shanghai Movie Festival. We invited Jon and Jason and everybody to be at the grand red carpet. And also, we shot Harper's Bazaar shooting, everything to make it people's perception that it's a great movie coming from Hollywood. But after the first weekend, because we saw that the box office was doing well, and it was also doing well in the U.S. and the rest of the world. Yeah. Then, we entered the second stage of marketing. Which is that we started to emphasize and stress the point that is our biggest selling point. That's probably one of the best co-production movies ever in history.
So after having the co-production tide flow against you while you were making the movie, once you got it out there and it was doing well?
Because people had a misconception or fear that it would be like the same bad co-productions before. But after the first weekend, people had already gone to the theaters and seen the movie, and they know it's really good. And all the Chinese elements are not so embarrassing or not so unnatural in the film. So people started to realize and embrace the fact it's a really fun movie and it's great. It's a great movie. So we started to emphasize, and also to keep the momentum of the because then people realize audience realized that co-production is really a selling point for our movie. So that's why our marketing campaign was kind of staged into 2 stages.
And I've forgotten though. I should have checked. Did it actually open number 1, or was it? And how did it hold in cinemas? In China?
It was actually not open number 1. We had very, very fierce competition in the market. We had 2 competitors releasing on the same day. One is called I Apartment, and the other is called The Island. And The I Apartment is based on one of the most popular TV sitcoms in China, and it had a huge fan base. So actually, the first day of box office on that day, on August 10th, was about 300 million for that film alone. And The Island was directed by Huang Bo. He's one of the leading actors in China, also very popular. So we were lacking or behind in terms of topics and everything. But because of the quality of the movie itself, and because of it's so entertaining, it also fit the summer timing. So actually, it went well. And I think after maybe a week or so, it became the number 1 in box office.
Yeah, it became number 1 in its 2nd week, I think.
Yeah.
Which is unusual in most cases. Now that you've got this huge success on your hands, what is CMC doing? You talked about location-based entertainment. Are there going to be theme parks being built? Are you going to make more movies in this franchise? We've heard that word twice already today.
Yeah, that is definitely in the plan.
Tell me more.
I think it's still a very early stage right now, but we are working. We're starting to work on it, but would like to keep it a secret or at this time, and it will give people more nice surprises when it comes out.
But we are.
You bought 5 books.
Yes, there are 5 books, but so The Trench, is just a hint, and that's all. But we are looking at theme parks as well. We've designed quite a few different types of rides and things, and hopefully China will have the first Jurassic aquarium in the world. And there's some really cool things going on there that we've been working on for over a year. So it's exciting.
Will you work with the same people again?
They're pretty great people.
And John?
Well, I don't know about John, but
He might finally get his payday.
That was so mean. I'm just listening
we
to all
love
this.
John. We love.
I kept thinking I did everything on this movie, and these people did so much. At that time, I think, oh, I'm so great. This is hard, what they're doing, and it's very impressive and what they've done and complicated. I just made the movie. I didn't have to figure all this nonsense out.
Well, maybe learn something.
I learned a lot. Look. There's phrases like, oh, that's not going to work in China. Oh, that's not going to work in America. And all. That's kind of gone on for a long time, right? Even just American films. That's not going to work in the South. That's not going to work in the North. And then as the world got bigger, that's not going to work in Germany. That's not going to work in Russia, became a thing. And we're always guessing, and we're usually wrong about most of these things. We don't really know what's going to work and what's not going to work, but we take our best shot. There's definitely small things that you have to understand culture to get right. Accents of people. I'm directed. I don't know a Southern Chinese accent from a Northern or a countryman versus an urban person. I don't know any of that stuff. And we certainly know that about our own country and how that works. But we're all talking about focusing on those things. What makes movies work is the similarity of all people, the universality of all these things, and how you just stand back and say, is this a movie, right? Now, I don't know. I don't think you guys are talking about, well, this is a co-production. I don't think audiences know any of that stuff, right? They're just going to see a movie or not seeing a movie. Americans have very little history going to movies where people don't speak English, okay? Europe, That's most of the movies they see is people speaking English. The Chinese, it's sort of an odd thing because for years there were no English-speaking movies. It wasn't part of the culture at all. And then suddenly it jumped in. Was it a fad? Was it interesting? Oh, the big American movie's coming. Well, screw them. We want the big... We're all figuring it out. And the Chinese people are changing and growing every day. So it's hard to stay ahead and know what those cultural and entertainment trends are. So I think you got to ignore them, personally.
Great. Go on.
I just want to add that Jon is being very gracious to the panelists here, but him saying I just made the movie, it can't be overstated what it means to a co-production to have a director of Jon's caliber to not only direct the movie, but dive into all the challenges that a co-production comes with. You know, he's directing a cast from all over the world. He is diving into making sure that the dialogue and the accents are right. He's engaging with, you know, the writers, us as executives. He wants to make the best movie possible. We give him parameters to do that within. And there's a normal set of parameters, and you add a layer, and a very tough layer, with the Chinese co-production elements. And he always said, like, just tell me what it is, and I'll do it. And he, to, like, more than I can say, like, to his credit, he not only did it, but he went above and beyond and made it great. And I think that comes across in the tone of the movie. And I think he still made it, you know, his movie. My favorite moment was when I got a call from our physical executive. I said this to Jon. Jon wants a dog. And dog wasn't in the script. And, you know, you can talk about Pippin and Jaws and this and that, but, I think most people didn't know what he was thinking. And to this day, like, Pippin is one of the most referenced, like, characters in the movie. And so I just want to say that as we all are talking about co-productions, having your leader dive in and embrace as much as he did, it was incredibly important.
Thank you.
Brave.
That's nice. And, you know, look,
And true.
I get asked a lot, what was it like working with the Chinese producers and all that stuff? And my answer is always, well, the answer is, what was it like working with these Chinese producers, right? I don't know what every Chinese producer is like. And again, I was working with smart people. There was a lot of interpretation going on. And when you have someone saying, well, in between saying, you know, the Chinese really want this, you don't really know if it's that person using the Chinese opinion to get what they want, or they're really representing what someone else wants, and that someone else might be using it to take care of what somebody else wants, right? So you're trying to take all this in. But they were so flexible. And, you know, I know these guys went to bat for the movie to the censors, to the boards they had to talk to. They didn't just listen to what they had to say and do it. They had discussions. They argued about it. And to do that, you need producers of a certain stature who will be listened to. They never gave commands. They gave suggestions and said, if you want the movie to work better, I think you should really do this or you're fired. No. And you need to listen to that. To get controversial for 1 second, oh boy,
Oh, no.
As I said, we have always adjusted in Hollywood for audiences, right? This audience won't like that, that audience won't like that. But we've never adjusted for censorship bureaus in other countries, right? So as all this Chinese money just came pouring into Hollywood, Hollywood just bent over backwards to take it. And for all of our free speech and artistic freedom, we were very happy to give it up to keep the Chinese government happy with the movie we were making, okay? That's really dangerous ground to be on. So you, as I think a studio and a financer and a filmmaker, have to really walk that minefield carefully, that you're not giving away what matters to you for that money, for pleasing an audience, no problem. For pleasing their government, that gets tricky. And I think it was even tricky for them because sometimes they knew what was best for the movie. And when someone had, no, you can't do that, you're like, I have to do that. It's the turning point in Act 3. They went to bat as well. And it actually showed me, though, every producer, whatever movie, is going to have ideas. You're like, what are you talking about? And like for me with the dog, it was my idea. And they're like, what? And they have their own things. But they listened and they understood. And so did the government in a way. They went, okay, I see that would wreck the movie if you did that. So there's this real conversation that has to happen if you're doing this. And if any one side knows, you're going to blow it. Because nobody knows.
We have a shot clock down there, and Jon has talked us to the second. Thank you very much indeed, panel. It was very interesting.
Well done.